So today's topic is Black politics and law, just anything relating to those topics, whether that be personal experiences going through the law school journey or actually talking about Black politics that are kind of going on right now. So yeah, just we've talked about this topic before, but it's something that's always relevant, one of those things that we can always keep bringing back. And so I'm really excited. We have Z speaking as well as myself. And then my friend Maya is going to be speaking, and she's someone I met through my law school. And Z and Maya are both going to be sharing some of their personal experiences. And then also, I think Z is going to touch on a few other points that are relating to Black politics. And then I'm going to speak on voter suppression. I did a senior capstone paper on the topic, so I thought it would be good to discuss in this Zoom session. It has a lot of um, facts and statistics and things like that. And then I also have credible sources that I got everything from. So if anybody would want the link to that paper after I'm done speaking on it, then I could send that to whoever wants it. Before we get started, did anybody have any comments they wanted to make just relating to anything or Black politics? Alrighty, if not, then I will go ahead and start us off with the voter suppression paper. I'm hoping it's not too long. If it starts getting a little lengthy, then like I said, I can send you guys the actual link to it. But it was really interesting to do the research on this because so many people today, when they're speaking about um, voter suppression, they try to say it doesn't exist. Like we've kind of moved past that, which as Black people, we know that's not true. It still exists in a lot of ways that people aren't aware of. And so I did find a lot of research on it. So to understand voter suppression and its effects on the Black community completely, it's important to look at the historical context surrounding the issue. So that's kind of what I first addressed, starting with the Three-Fifths Compromise, where it was in 1787. It was the Constitutional Convention, and it determined that every 3 out of 5 slaves was counted when determining a state's total population for legislative representation and taxation. Before the Civil War, the Three-Fifths Compromise gave a disproportionate representation of slave states in the House of Representatives. So that's kind of where it first starts off, where Black people were not even counted as a full person when it came to voting purposes, and their bodies were counted, but they didn't actually have a say in anything. So that's kind of where I began. And then after that, I was talking about the time period of the Civil War and after the 14th Amendment was passed. Oh, sorry, I'm going to also be admitting people while I'm speaking, but a lot of people thought that after the 14th Amendment was passed, just kind of solved all issues. But once again, as Black people, we know that's not true. And then even after the 15th Amendment was passed, the struggle for voting rights continued for Black citizens. There was often language of a progressive reform. Southern states passed a wide array of voting restrictions, including but not limited to 8-box laws, registration acts, secret ballot laws, poll taxes, literacy and property tests, understanding qualifications, and white primaries. And the policies may not have used outright racist language, but they did produce racist effects, as do a lot of laws that we still see today. Um, so then, alongside the legal restrictions in the past, there was the use of state-sanctioned violence and fear tactics to stop Black people from voting. The Jim Crow era was in full swing, and most notable as a system of legal segregation attributed to the infamous Plessy versus Ferguson decision and the codification of the separate but equal doctrine. With this era, as one can imagine, came full-scale disenfranchisement of the Black community in voting. Voting policies and legislation in general was targeted at maintaining white supremacist ideologies. This was done through the use of mechanisms such as grandfather clauses, which excused persons registered on prior to January 1st, 1866 and their descendants from having to comply with any literacy or property requirements for voting registration. Before 1866, Black people were not eligible to register and therefore were unable to cast a ballot, so their descendants would have been ineligible to vote based on the parameters of the grandfather clauses. Additionally, it was illegal for African Americans to learn to read and write, making literacy among the formerly enslaved and population extremely limited. So we have a lot of historical barriers to start us off with the voter suppression, which makes sense why we still see stains of this today. Then I kind of went into the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It's pretty well known. It led to some advancements in the voting community for Black people, but still there was other ways around that we see. Let me see. Sorry, I'm trying not to read a word for word so we don't get too lengthy, but because of the laws reach and protections, African American voting and elected officials increased substantially in the aftermath of its passage. Efforts to weaken the Voter Rights Act emerged in its aftermath as well. The efforts to weaken the Voter Rights Act became evident when looking at Shelby County versus Holder. That was a decision in the Supreme Court, right when America finally took 2 steps forward in the voting for Black citizens, then voter suppression kind of pushed us back a little bit. In the Shelby case, the court found the coverage formula in Section 4B outdated and therefore unconstitutional. The majority went so far as to suggest that problems with electoral access were in the past, stating that voting tests were abolished, disparities in voter registration and turnout due to race were erased, and African Americans attained political office in record numbers. However, throughout the 2012 election, reports were consistent of long voting lines, challenges to voters based on questionable citizenship status, and inaccurate voter information distributed to the language minorities. The decision generated racially disproportionate effects for the Black voice. In politics, again, voter suppression shifted into its next form due to a myth that was easier for the courts and arguably all of society to believe, that voter suppression and its racial discriminatory effects are things of the past. So yeah, that's an argument that we see today a lot. But we see a lot of discrimination in voter ID laws. For example, in Texas, it was they have one of the nation's strictest voter ID laws because it only allowed for a handful of acceptable types of identification. This had direct negative effects on Hispanic and the Black electorate, who often lack these forms of official identification. As for the North Carolina voter suppression policies passed, they too imposed strict voter ID requirements. They also cut early voting days, eliminated same-day registration, and ended pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds. Many of the cuts were made to programs that had been designed and shown to increase turnout and participation among Black and young voters. Voter suppression and its proven effects on Black and minority voters is a systemic issue that is hidden in plain sight with the permission of the courts. I'm just gonna do something real quick, my bad. So today's voter suppression is more subtle, but it's still very prevalent. It can be seen through some of the voting legislation as discussed above, which may seem race neutral, but in actuality is not. Evidence explains that colorblind policies refer to procedures that do not explicitly identify or articulate a relationship to any specific racial or ethnic group, but instead produce racially disproportionate outcomes after implementation. Voter ID laws, provisional ballots, changes to voter registration procedures, and decreasing the number of early voting days have been adopted under race-neutral premises, but all minimize the minority voter turnout. This is what enables voter suppression practices to continue to go unnoticed. If the effects of these so-called colorblind policies are not studied carefully and called out loudly, Americans continue to live in a lie that voting policies are now fair for all citizens. A 2008 Supreme Court ruling gave rise to current protections over voter ID laws. A review of Crawford v. Marion County is therefore essential given the precedent set and because of important particulars not broadly apparent at the time. Indeed, highly respected jurist, author, and law professor Richard Posner admitted that his opinion from the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals was a mistake. Posner noted that the voter ID laws, like Indiana's, are now widely regarded as a means of suppression rather than fraud prevention. At first glance, a lot of people say that voter ID laws are not problematic, but if you dig deeper, um, there is a lot of problems for the Black community in them. Getting an ID is not cheap, and it can be a lengthy process, seeing as you also have to have your birth certificate. There are a lot of obstacles for communities of color with getting IDs. Preventing voter fraud is understandable. However, with all of the ways one can verify identity nowadays, there should be other alternatives available or eligible. Voters should receive free photo ID if it's required. Black voters face major barriers at the polls, which are the direct result from some of these so-called colorblind policies. Since 2010, over a dozen states have enacted new laws requiring voters to bring a government-issued ID to the polls to vote in person. The rationale behind many of these laws is to prevent in-person voter impersonation, a type of fraud that multiple comprehensive studies have found is extremely rare. Black citizens and voters of color are less likely than whites to hold the required ID to vote and therefore are more burdened by voter ID laws. Multiple studies have found this. And so a nationwide study of validated voter data from 2017 found that gaps between Black and white turnout and Latino and white turnout were significantly wider in states with strict voter ID laws. These results prove that seemingly race-neutral voter policies put in place by different states impact the Black and minority voices in politics in a detrimental way. And then as we entered into the era of mass incarceration, voter suppression took on its next form, felony voter disenfranchisement. Many courts have allowed laws that contribute to felony voter disenfranchisement because they have been amended since the collapse of Jim Crow and no longer have overtly racist language. The discriminatory stains that were once on these laws no longer exist, supposedly. This is a false narrative, and according to a civil rights lawyer and legal scholar, Michelle Alexander, felon disenfranchisement laws have been more effective in eliminating Black voters in the age of mass incarceration than they were during Jim Crow. Less than 2 decades after the war on drugs began, 1 in 7 Black men nationally had lost the right to vote, and as many as 1 in 4 in those states with the highest African American disenfranchisement rate. When looking at this evidence, it becomes painfully clear that felony voter disenfranchisement is producing disproportionate effects for the Black community. Something that may seem neutral or colorblind, as discussed earlier, is working in a way that marginalizes Black voices in politics. This is even more painful when considering the ways that many scholars describe the war on drugs as actually being a war on communities of color, as they were swept into jails by the masses for even minor drug infractions. The same author, Alexander, continues stating that these figures may understate the impact of felon disenfranchisement because they do not take into account the millions of people who cannot vote in states that require people with felony convictions to pay fines or fees before their voting rights can be restored, the new poll tax of modern day. So then the restoration, that's a hard word, of voting rights after conviction becomes yet another obstacle for the Black community to face. An example of this can be seen in Florida, Alabama, Arizona, and Tennessee, where restoration was conditional on the payment of all restitution, fines, and fees. These voting policies may not be outright racist, but America must consider the policy's effects when they're implemented. Are these policies producing equitable effects for every citizen, or are they promoting marginalization of certain voices? Another study states that Black Americans of voting age are nearly 4 times as likely to lose their voting rights than the rest of the adult population, with 1 out of every 16 Black adults disenfranchised nationally. As of 2020, in 7 states, Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi, Tennessee, Virginia, Wyoming, more than 1 in 7 Black adults are disenfranchised. In total, 1.8 million Black citizens are banned from voting. Indeed, it's undeniable and it's unarguable that Black Americans are harmed most by felony voter disenfranchisement. The Black vote and therefore the Black voice in politics is being harmed nationwide. Mississippi is a state that is known for having some of the worst felony disenfranchisement, with a rate that is more than triple of the national rate of disenfranchisement. With Mississippi having one of the highest populations in America of Black citizens, one can see why the statistic would be particularly alarming. Mass incarceration and felony voter disenfranchisement play major roles in today's voter suppression of the Black community. Critics in the mainstream media argue that despite disproportionate harm that felony voter disenfranchisement causes for Black citizens, felony voting could create a dangerous situation for the nation. One of these studies states that Roger Clegg of the Center for Equal Opportunity voiced his concerns that we would not want people voting who are not trustworthy. The reason that we should avoid such people, according to the testimony of Todd Gaziano of the Heritage Foundation, is that criminal disenfranchisement allows citizens to decide law enforcement issues without the dilution of voters who are deemed to be less trustworthy, and those communities that currently have the highest level of state disenfranchisement are the most protected by those laws and would be the most adversely affected by the vote of the unreformed convicts in their communities. That's a direct quote from someone. In other words, felony voters would then vote for policies that would help criminals and not be loyal to the nation when voting or participate in electoral fraud. That's basically the assumption that people make from the other side. In response to the first concern, it is unfair to exclude criminal voters on that basis. They're still citizens of the United States, and their voices deserve to be heard just like any other citizen. Making a mistake shouldn't change the fact that you are a citizen and you do have a say in what's going on. You're a part of the American population. Besides this, those who have been in prison could offer a different perspective to the policies that we are voting on. They could vote for candidates who could change the prison system to which they have firsthand experience with. And then with the second concern, a felony conviction is not a way that is proven to mean such a thing in a democratic nation that is supposed to promote different perspectives and inclusion. It seems very exclusionary. So yeah, that's just kind of like touching on some of the other arguments for the other side of things. But let me just see. There might be one more point. Oh, I thought this was pretty interesting. It's about why also some Black citizens decide not to vote. So African Americans trust government less than whites, which has been best explained by the history of racism and discrimination in the United States. The American South, the home of the Jim Crow laws, and numerous efforts to subvert the African American vote have been a basation of racial hatred toward African Americans. Moreover, racial segregation remains prevalent in the country, and many bemoan the educational, economic, social, and justice systems as being anti-African American. The history of the marginalization in the Black community and in modern day that we face has created an atmosphere of distrust when it comes to the government and politics. The oppression that has occurred has shown Black citizens that the government may not always have their best interests in mind, and more often than not, they don't. Prior research also explains that only a few works have addressed political trust among African Americans. Most pertinent here addresses whether the political trust among African Americans shapes political participation. He argues that political trust affects African Americans' political participation differently than it does whites. What every evidence highlights here is only logical. If Black citizens cannot trust that their government has the best interests at heart, has our best interests at heart and best interest in mind, or that politics is set up for them to succeed, then what would be the point in participating at all politically? So that's kind of an attitude that exists among the Black community as well, because there's always been a fight to be seen as equal politically for the Black community. A sense of hopelessness may arise. Will the government ever give us equal opportunity? What's even the point of me voting when my fate is already decided? Evidence also states that African Americans trust the government when they believe that discrimination is being dealt with and that two major political parties are working on their behalf. The reference group model shows that Americans affect towards social groups and influence their reluctance or willingness to integrate influence their trust in government. So in other words, until the Black community sees issues, racial issues being addressed here in America, they won't have a lot of trust in the government. That's an area that Black voters want to see a lot of change in. So yeah, that's basically the main points that I covered with voter suppression. I think it's a really interesting topic and pretty extensive. Like I said, I can definitely send that paper out for the resources, all credible sites, since I had to write it for my senior capstone paper. But I see one comment in the chat. Yeah, so Nettie, one of the reasons why a lot of Black people don't have these IDs are because of the expenses related to getting an ID. Um, and then also like some states like Texas, they require only specific types of ID. Like I think one of them was literally like um the one you use when you have a gun, like the gun registration or whatever. So if you don't have that very specific type of ID, paying to go get one like that just to vote, like, it's kind of a big expense for the Black community. And we know that a lot of us fall in the middle to low income area. So I think that's a big part of it. But yes, I'll definitely send out the link. Did anybody else have anything to add to that topic of voter suppression or questions or anything? Alrighty. If not, thank you guys for listening to that little spiel. It wasn't everything, but the main points that I covered. So yes, now we can go ahead and move on to Z's speech. Like I said, she'll be addressing a few different points and then some personal experience as well. So Z, you can go ahead.
Hi guys. Okay, so I just drafted up some kind of points that I wanted to talk about, just some countless systematic barriers that are in place for Black people pursuing law or in politics. So a couple I have is implicit bias. If you do not know what that is, and sorry, I'm looking over here because I have it in a Word document, but implicit bias for stereotypes and the pre-reflective attributes of qualities by an individual to a member of some social groups. Example, 80% of white judges strongly associate Black faces with negative words and then white faces with positive words. Also going into like law school and politics, discriminatory dress codes. I know I have a current internship at Olympia. It's hybrid. So sometimes I'm in Olympia and sometimes I'm doing it remote. And I know they have really strong dress codes, such as the length of our skirts, shorts. We can't use hats. Headscarves is something that a lot of people deal with because it's me and this other girl who is, I believe, I don't know. I think Muslim, I believe. I really don't know exactly, but she does use a head covering because of her religion and because of her background. And so I know that was pretty a lot during the time when we we're going to our onboarding process, because she was looking at kind of all the restrictions. She's like, oh, I do this for religion purposes. I didn't follow up with her with that, but next time I will tell you guys what happened with that. Also head wraps. A lot of Black women use head wrap just because it protects their hair during the day, or sometimes our hair is not kept up to date. And so we go within stores, schools, etc. with head wraps. So I know that can be really discriminatory against Black people within law school and or law work. Also because of lack of financial support from families. That's just going towards like law school. I was looking up some statistics within law school for especially Black people, and a lot of Black individuals are low income, and so they don't have enough money to attend law school, even with like loans and etc. I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of loans you need like a co-signer, or you need to have previous credit. If we're just getting out of undergraduate school, a lot of us don't have enough credit to even sign up for loans. Or if we're coming from a low income family, which most Black individuals who attend law school are, they don't have a co-signer because a lot of their family members don't sign up for loans or don't have good credit, etc. And then this one is just for like more for like Black women within politics, but like gender discrimination. It says that most women lawyers may encounter discriminatory in hiring, compensation, promotion, and other areas within law work. I know I'm taking an African American women's history class with Dr. Bain. She came on here last month, and she was speaking about how she has a couple of lawyer friends that attended Gonzaga, and when they started to get into kind of their law work, they were finding out that their white male peers were getting paid more than her. And mind you, they've been at that same law firm at the same time. So it's like they both did the onboarding process at the same time. And so it kind of frustrated her, even though she came from Gonzaga. And I don't know if you guys know, Gonzaga is like the top, well, I think it's second. I think UW is the first in Washington, and then second is Gonzaga for law schools within Washington State. And her other like white male peers came from like little schools, which I'm not saying that little schools are not important, because no matter where you get your law degree, it still depends on you and yourself and how you retain the information and how you put that information to work. But just saying how like she's coming from a top law school and these other white male counterparts are coming from, you know, little small law schools, and she's still getting underpaid. And so that was really, I don't know, I just wanted to bring that up because I feel like that's a lot. Racism within politics, especially going back to when I said a lot of people, especially white judges, strongly associate Black faces with negative words. People do that as well. So when you see like Black governors, such as the one that's running in Washington currently right now, they're always trying to pull from our background to see anything bad, anything slightly bad. And so I feel like, oh, that's something that Black people within politics and slash law have to deal with. Is like, we have to grow up like really good. Don't post something on social media. Don't do anything slightly remote that's bad, because they're going to pull it from our past, which is really interesting. And then that's kind of what I just wanted to talk about generally. I do have some Black law movies or some politic books if you guys do want to like kind of watch and or read. One of them I'm watching right now is Sisters in Law, about Black women in law. Currently, I love it. It's a good show. Another one is Marshall. I don't know, you guys know who Thurgood Marshall is. Was a lawyer back in the way back in the day and an activist. It's based off his life and his upcoming as a lawyer. And I feel like that has a lot of information about kind of like slavery, discriminatory laws put in place for African American people, and then how he kind of tried to use his work to give back to the African American community. And a lot of people, because I don't know, you're gonna have to watch it, but it's like this one law firm that he was working for was white. And so they didn't really want him to do that. And so I feel like those are some good to start out with. I do have more, just let me know. I can put them in a chat. It's just a lot. Yeah, that's all I had. Any questions, comments, or anything I want me to like go over again?
I was just gonna say thank you for sharing the research you found, Z. And maybe I wanted you to talk a little bit about your experience since you're gonna be applying for law schools soon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Personally.
Yeah, so just like probably just touch on more of my like internships with Olympia, because that's what a lot of like, it's law and a lot of politics. I don't know. It's been good so far. There has been like some iffy situations where I'm like, oh, like there's obviously a lot of Black issues. Like one of my issues that I'm trying to work on right now, because I'm going back to Olympia on the 4th, is like retention rates in Black communities, especially like Eastern Washington University and Western Washington University. And I think the other one was, I think it's Whitworth. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's in Spokane as well. That has the highest retention rate for Black students. And so trying to push that has been really hard, because a lot of my peers are white. And so I don't think they understand how like big of a kind of problem it is within Black communities, especially right now with retention rates. Also with like my law firm that I worked back in, I think 2019, is for Disabilities Rights of Washington. They work with disability acts. So say if you're parking in a disability lot and they don't have like the sticker so people can actually see it, that's a code or something like that. I don't know. I just something I signed up for because I wanted on my resume, low key. But even that was hard because it was during like Black History Month, and they always try to like push me to do like Black History Month like things. They're like, oh, we want you to do this, we want you to do that. And it's like, okay, I get it, because you guys want to, I feel like you guys do want to be a little bit more educated, but it's also like, you're doing it because I'm the only Black female in the room. Like, can teach you, and everybody else can go on Google. Like, it's not that hard. And so, yeah, I haven't experienced a lot of like discriminatory within like kind of my internships, and hopefully I don't ever. And so, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. Did anybody else have any questions for Z? Anything to add to her topics? Alrighty. If not, then we can go ahead and go to Maya's speech, and she's talking about some personal experiences as well with her law school journey.
Hi guys, I'm Amaya. I'm Renice's friend from law school. I'm coming here all the way from New Jersey, which is a big part of my story because obviously Idaho was not my first choice, especially being a person of color. It's been very uncomfortable for me to be not only this far from home, but in a state that doesn't align with my beliefs and kind of have a lot of people like me out here. So I wanted to share just two statements, basically my personal statement and my diversity statement that I submitted to get into law school. I probably applied to over 25 law schools and was denied from every single one except for two, waitlisted at one, and then one of my offers were revoked after the affirmative action decision was struck down this summer with the Supreme Court, which is something that I like to tell people every time, especially white people who I have encountered and disagreed with affirmative action and kind of said it was unfair to white and Asian students, when I am a direct product of what happened once affirmative action was struck down, because the school that I was accepted to was in Minnesota, which is a lot closer to New Jersey. And as we know, in Minnesota, Minneapolis was where everything happened with George Floyd, which I also got to see over this summer. And it was just somewhere that I would have liked to be. But because of that decision, the school had no choice but to revoke my offer, or they were going to get sued and put, their institution in jeopardy. And it didn't only happen to me; it happened to a couple students of color, because my LSATs were so low that it was below the median for acceptances that weren't race conscious or gender conscious or just any sort of marginalized kind of thing that would allow me to be accepted on a means that is not like standardized testing. So I'm going to start with my first statement. Just a trigger warning. I don't know if certain things make people feel uncomfortable or sad. I don't share this story for empathy or pity. I've come a long way. I'm breaking the generational curse. So everything that I have been through in the past, it's something that I openly like to share with people, especially people that deny that these things do happen within inner cities and within the city. So I come from a city called Newark, New Jersey. I don't know how familiar you guys are with New Jersey, but for reference, I live about 20 minutes from New York City. And Newark is a known city for crime and just being a major inner city within New Jersey. So this is my personal statement, and it says, as a return from holiday break in 2006, all my classmates were sharing the stories about the Barbie dolls and monster trucks they received for Christmas. I sat by myself and thought about my most valued gift I had received that Christmas. A letter signed and dated from the state county prison. I love you, Dad. I was only 5 years old when my father was set up by the FBI and arrested for the possession and transfer of marijuana. He was born into poverty and grew up surrounded by drugs. His father, who was an addict, used drugs to numb the pain of being a Black man in America. He long suffered with the entrapment of drugs and poverty, ultimately losing his life to a dirty needle, causing AIDS to spread throughout his body when my father was only 19. As the children of addicts, my parents bonded over their shared trauma. They had both grew up too fast, and they found in each other a stability that they lacked in their own homes. Within a year, they found themselves pregnant. Committed to giving my sister, Mariah, the best life they could, they dropped out of high school and began working minimum wage jobs. In their communities, a few spoke the language. Is
Sorry, I
someone?
think someone joined, and so there was like noise in the background for a second. Continue.
Oh, I was okay. Um, in their communities, a few people spoke the language of college and careers. As with so many young Black men and women in the US, their communities were built on gang affiliation and drug trade. And when they weren't able to earn enough to build a life for their young family, my father saw no other alternative but to sell drugs. Ultimately, he and his 5 brothers were all incarcerated. Upon release, one of my uncles was murdered after unsuccessfully attempting to leave the gang. Most of my core childhood memories are of prisons. While my friends spent weekends at the park or playing outside, I spent mine visiting my uncles and father in prison. The guards showed no remorse. As I kicked, screamed, and cried just to have a couple more minutes with my dad, they urged my mom to remove me from the facility before my father would have to deal with the repercussions of my outbursts. What I didn't understand then was that the system wasn't created for men like my father to succeed. Today, my father's story inspires me to avoid the trap of poverty. It motivates me to make change within communities like his by pursuing a career as a lawyer. I refuse to be the picture that stereotypes have painted for me, refuse the destiny that a family history of incarceration and drug use, a product of teen pregnancy, might predict. Unlike my father and other members of my family, I was lucky enough to be accepted into the Educational Opportunity Fund program at Kean University, which provided me with countless opportunities throughout my undergraduate career. With the EOF program, I have been able to attend the Bryant Leadership Institute, where I won a leadership award for my story. I completed the Seton Hall pre-legal program, and EOF has covered the cost of countless summer and winter courses that would otherwise be unaffordable to me. Along with these opportunities, I have used my voice at several conferences, including the New Jersey Capitol, where I spoke in front of legislators sharing the importance of EOF and why the program should continue to be funded. And I will read my second statement. And if you have questions about certain things, obviously a personal statement can't go too in depth on smaller things within my story, but that was kind of more of my father's jail story. This is more of kind of just the experiences living within government funded households and being low income. So this was my diversity statement, which is now not allowed on law school applications since affirmative action was struck down, which is unfortunate. But many children grew up in happy homes, but that wasn't my reality. I held my sister's hand as I cried through the arguing and broken glass that could be heard from the next room. It was routine every week to hide in the closet with my sister for the same argument my parents had. My mother's paycheck was being diverted for my dad's $10,000 jail bail bond, a debt that she now had to pay because my dad didn't show up to one of his court dates. The argument felt like a never-ending song. I closed my eyes and prayed that my father wouldn't hurt my mother. I didn't want to lose another parent again. I became terrified of him. Prison made him so angry and violent. The man I once looked at as my superhero became a monster. I felt like I portrayed him the day I dialed 911 during a weekly scheduled argument between my parents. I felt that I saved my mother's life by making that call. But to my surprise, my mother was so angry with me. I was confused and traumatized, but I knew I could never do that again. No matter what, as instructed, I didn't ask questions and I didn't tell anyone what was happening in my household. The abuse continued, and my own trauma came through in years of bedwetting. This only infuriated my father more, and I was punished every time. It took years of the same argument. They had come to the realization that the argument caused my behavioral issues in school. The phone calls home became as frequent as my parents' arguments. I had a hard time getting along with other students and even teachers. School was just as dreadful as going home because I was being bullied not only by other students, but by my teachers. I was only in the 5th grade when my homeroom teacher announced in front of my class that I was ugly, and only in 8th grade when my counselor told me I'd be in prison or dead by the time I finished high school. It was dehumanizing going to a school in an underfunded community where my teachers didn't understand what it was like to grow up how I did. I was treated as if I were worthless, another hopeless delinquent from Newark, New Jersey. I went through countless family therapy groups, school counseling, and was often isolated in the classroom. My mom took the step and applied for Section 8 housing. My dad still had no job, and their split up meant our split up. Section 8 has helped me escape a toxic household, and it kept a roof over my head. My mother went to work 6 days a week, trying her best to provide my sister and me with a good life, despite everything we have been through. SNAP benefits and government housing provided for our necessities. We moved out of the house we lived in with my now absent father and into a tiny apartment in a 4th floor walk up. I found peace in knowing that I wouldn't have to worry about the aggressive fights between my parents. This ultimately helped me stop wetting the bed at the age of 13. In its place came crippling anxiety and dissociation, a feeling that nothing was real. Any moment I felt too happy, I would enter a deep state of derealization. I asked my mom to pinch me just so I knew these moments were real and I could experience happiness. The events in my life had convinced me that I wasn't deserving of anything, that something had to go wrong before I could be happy. Or even if I did experience happiness, it had to be too good to be true. Our new apartment became a physical manifestation of that happiness trap. Most children's first pets are usually a fish or a dog. Mine were roaches and mice. I envied people who had a house without rodents. I wish I could have friends over, but that was off limits because of the infestation. One night, it got so bad I had to go to the hospital with my mom after a roach crawled into her ear in the middle of the night while she was sleeping. I still flinch whenever I feel anything tickling my skin, thinking about the countless nights I've slept with roaches. Our living situation also brought on my chronic asthma. I never can leave my house without my inhaler now. Things only got worse when my grandmother lost her apartment and had to move in with us. For 3 years, my mother, sister, and I shared one room with 2 twin-sized beds. It was difficult being a child, going through puberty, having no privacy and no time for self-reflection. Despite the hardships I have been through, it's given me the motivation to pursue my dreams to become an attorney. I want my future to be different from what I grew up like. I want to break those generational curses. I have shattered the statistics that have predicted my future and instead chosen my own path. My experiences have given me a different outlook on the world, an understanding grounded in my experiences of systematic poverty and discrimination. Taking the steps to go to law school and pursue a career in the field of law allows me to speak and act for thousands of young children who have shared the same experiences I have. I want to continue to protect underdeveloped areas and provide them with access to resources that I have lacked. Despite the fact that I didn't have access to the same opportunities or the best programs, or perhaps because of it, I will persevere and continue to work 10 times harder to ensure those 3 letters follow my last name in 3 years, so I can continue protecting and serving justice to all marginalized communities. Yeah, so that was my statements for law school, and I had to be completely transparent. My LSAT score was a 139. That was the highest that I got on it, and I still got into 2 law schools with that and waitlisted at Syracuse Law School in New York. But ultimately, and Syracuse Law School in New York, their LSAT's median is like 165. So it was like they called me and they said, we don't even look at students who are below 145. But because of my story, they thought I really deserved the chance to break that generational curse for my family. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm getting emotional. So it was really nice to be able to go to law school this year and overcome a lot of the struggles that my family has been through. My sister also broke that generational curse for our family. She has an MBA from Johns Hopkins University and a really good job in New York City. So we're taking our struggles and we're using it to make change for children that grew up like us, because we don't want anyone else, any more Black children to suffer, because the cards are not in our favor and it's not fair. And it is built off the system that slavery created. And we're going to keep fighting until we make it right. So thank you for listening to me, guys. If you have any questions, you can ask.
Thank you so much. Just wanted you to know that a bunch of people were putting up hearts on the screen as you were talking.
Oh, thank you guys.
And then you have a chat. Nisha says you are strong and here for a reason.
Oh,
And
thank
yes, I
you.
agree. Thank you so much for sharing that, Maya. Her story is so inspiring to me. And that's why I get so irritated at our law school because it is tough in law school in general, I'm sure, for any Black student because it's going to be predominantly white in whatever law school you go to. But especially in Idaho, like she said, it's just like probably even worse. And so I feel like she's also dealt with a lot of experiences at our school. And then we've both dealt with experiences with our teachers being a little ignorant. And so it's frustrating to know that someone's like her is trying so hard to like break these curses and we're here for like these really important reasons. And then people like are just not the best in law school. Like it makes imposter syndrome real and it makes it a very hard time. But like she said, we're here fighting, for an important reason. So I'm really glad that I met her and that she is making her family proud. Also someone said you are so inspiring. You got this girl, keep shining in the chat. Did anybody else have any other comments for Maya for her story or questions? Nisha, yes, go ahead.
I just want to say that I can closely relate to your story and understand the struggles because I grew up in New Orleans. And I just want to say that I'm sorry, so I'm a second year law student. And I just want to say being in spaces that doesn't feel as welcoming or where you feel like you're out of place, I think it's very important for you to especially not be afraid to speak up and be yourself. I think that is the most important thing that you can do to educate a lot of people because a lot of people have never been around people that came from the Black community or have faced those type of struggles. So I think that this gives us an understanding of why the system is working the way they do, because yes, these people are going into advocacy for other people, but they don't understand the troubles and the problems, so they can't effectively advocate for those people and solve those problems. So I think that's a good view for us to see and also to open their eyes to somewhat, whatever way we can to make some type of difference. So I just want to say don't shield yourself, don't feel ashamed, don't feel like you're behind because honestly, coming from the struggles and growing up through those things give us a big advantage in basically like the general common sense and evaluating these cases and the problems and the issue spotting. So don't discount yourself and don't throw that against you. That's all the more to help you succeed.
Thank you so much. So yeah, you definitely get it. New Orleans is kind of more on my side of the country too. So that's exactly why I decided to come here. Obviously it wasn't my first choice, but that's how passionate I am about making that change that I literally moved across the country, 2,000 miles away from home on a 3-hour time difference. Like it was a tough last semester. I've been going through it still this semester because it's so hard not having your support right here. But like you said, like I feel like this is just another stepping stone for me to be in a place where I'm not comfortable, but I'm understanding, like I'm educating other people who have not had the same walk of life as me. And I think me being here was like there was a purpose, there was a reason why it had to happen this way. So yeah, I appreciate your words. Like they're truly inspiring, and I'm really happy that you're here too, and that you're already at 2L. Like you already made it past that 1L year. So
Yeah, and if there's anything that I can help with to anyone here in the chat, that any questions or any guidance, I'm always here. You can openly like email, text, or whatever the case may be. We are in the same location, so we can meet up. But that goes to anyone for any questions I can answer, any guidance I can provide. I'm happy to help.
Thank you guys so much. I love the making connections and I'm really proud of everyone that's here and for any Black person that makes it into law school because we know that the statistics are set against us, Black low income. It's really tough being in a space where a lot of people are talking about how their parents paid for them to get to law school and how they don't have any struggles. And then actually me and Maya just had an experience recently where one of our teachers had used the term colored to talk about Black people, and we were just like, that's kind of like outdated. So luckily he was pretty open to like hearing our comments on it. But another student had not understood why it was a big deal if he didn't mean it in a bad way. Like, why did we have to care about it or anything like that? And I think it just goes to show, like you guys are saying, like we do have the opportunity to like show people um different experiences, especially in Idaho. Like I think there has to be a reason why we're there, to hopefully open their eyes on some things. And later on, that same student who said that did come back and talk to us and was like, sorry, like I shouldn't have just dismissed your guys' feelings. Like I'd be interested to learn more about this. So I think that is a nice opportunity that we have, even though it is a struggle for sure. Um, but yes, I am so glad that we are all there. Anybody else have any comments? Any law school questions? I know we have some law school students on here. Or Z, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I didn't, but I did have a law school question since you guys are asking. How much work do you guys do per day? Like, give us an estimate. Like, is it compared to like undergraduate work or is it way more?
Um, I think they say 2L year is the year you work the most. So maybe Nisha can speak on that. And then 1L year is 1L year is the year they scare you the most. And then 3L year is more chill. But I would say I was not expecting, well, I guess I was expecting the workload. It's just a lot of reading. A lot of reading. There's not a lot of assignments. They're mainly is just like a midterm and a final exam. So most of your time is just spent reading. I wouldn't say it's comparable to undergrad. I would say you read what you read in undergrad in 1 week, you probably read in law school in like 1 day. So if you like reading, then it's okay. It's definitely a learning curve, a lot to get used to. Maya, did you want to comment on that too for 1L?
Yeah, so this semester I put in I would say 6 hours a day after school. Um, so with classes, however many classes I have that day, I would probably put in an additional 6 hours after school every day. And that's just this semester because I have to work a little bit harder this semester. Um, and it's that I feel prepared with that. So it really just depends. You have to find your groove, but I would say at minimum put in 3 hours additional to after school. Um, I put in 6. I know people who put in 10. Like there's people in our law school who will stay from after class till like 11 o'clock at night. But for me, that will cause burnout. So I like to come home, give myself like an hour or two, and then put in 6 hours. And then, yeah, that usually works for me.
Yeah, like she said, it really depends on like the student, I think. And I also work, by the way, so um I kind of work my schedule around that. They don't let you work more than 10 hours unless you have like a waiver that you can get um with law school because of how much like it's like having a job basically. But yeah, I probably put in the 3 hours after classes. And then obviously there's days where you are really tired and sometimes you gotta use Quimby. Just saying everybody, Quimby is a thing and you should get it before you go to law school for those days that you are burnt out or tired. But yeah, definitely agree with what Maya said. And then Nisha, were you gonna say comment for 2L?
Yes, so definitely a lot of reading, and the reading is dense, and the concepts that you have to grasp from reading, like it may cause you to like something you think, oh, this will take me like say for instance, you get a reading that's like maybe 20 pages. You'll be like, oh, I can read this in no time, but it's very dense and you kind of have to grasp the concepts before you go to class because if not, you'll end up like having to go back and try to read and understand depending on your professor and how you are with like taking notes and understanding in class. And cold calling is a thing to where you will freak out and forget everything. So it's like definitely a heavy workload with the reading. You with 2L year, now have like a class called Advanced Advocacy where we have to kind of like uh draft an appellate brief, which we have to they give us a case and we have to do like our own research, and we have like so many cases and requirements that they're making us meet, which is like an adjustment because um these dates, like we get professionalism points for like being late or finding these sources by this date and showing them like for different little various tedious things. And I think the undergrad is definitely not a comparison because you can cram in law school, but you would drive yourself crazy because it's so much information in certain classes. You have to memorize certain books, or I mean, certain exams are like open book, which is the worst exams in my opinion, because they require you to find the exact information, the exact sources, and you can find yourself scrambling from pages to pages among time. So I think the biggest thing that you can deal with these kinds of things is basically being organized and have yourself like a set schedule. Like I have a calendar that I set like certain study schedule times to make sure I'm hitting all my assignments and I'm not missing anything. And that way I pop up with a reminder like, hey, you need to do this assignment or this is your time to do this. So that helps keep me aligned. I find that a way to learn without getting like kind of tired and worn out is just like make sure you're giving yourself the appropriate amount of like breaks in between, or giving yourself time to process the information before just like keep on like constantly piling on top of each other, and look for other resources. And I also am a big user of Quimby, so like any other resources that you can find that can like break it down to you in another way, or maybe you want to listen to like a podcast. There's like a bunch of podcasts that are helpful. Quimby has like videos and different explanations because you want to be careful with your resources that you use, because a lot of them like YouTube and stuff can be way off or explain it in ways that will make you go the opposite of what you intend. So yes, the workload is heavy, but it's definitely doable with the set schedule and like different. You have to understand how you learn and how long you can go, and then you can like kind of base yourself with different strategies off of that. So yeah, it's a lot, but it's doable. Don't let anything freak you out for like hearing people say, "Oh, this is hard," because someone else's hard is like you're, "Oh, I got this." Like so.
Yes, thank you so much. I was definitely surprised at how it is manageable, like she said, when you have like a set schedule. And also for the breaks, we learned this technique this year when I was studying for finals, because you study for finals for long hours of the day. I would normally study for 1 hour, set a timer literally for 1 hour, put my phone on do not disturb, then take like a 30-minute break or a 15-minute break, whatever works for you. Or some people do like 45 minutes of studying and then take a 15-minute break. I think doing that can help you focus more so you just don't start spacing out when you read, because like everyone is saying, you do have to retain the information. You can't just like read it and not really understand it. Because if you get that cold call, it's real cold. When you don't know the answer, it's real cold. So I think that's a good technique as well. But yeah, definitely manageable. Everyone scared me when I was coming to law school. I thought it was going to be like unmanageable. And there's definitely times where you are tired, but you get those certain absences. And I recommend taking mental health days when you need it. Um, we have our lectures recorded, so yeah, I take those when I'm feeling super burnt out. But overall, I think it's definitely doable, like Nisha said. Anybody else have anything to add to this topic?
I think another thing to mention as far as the fatigue learning, I'm the same way when it comes to that. So what I've been doing this semester is I'll do like one reading and like one case briefing and take like a 15-minute and then get back to it. And like within that 15-minute, I try not to just sit and rest or just like go on my phone. I try to like, okay, I'll throw a load of laundry in, or I'll wipe down the tables or do something else that is like productive, that I need to get done, instead of just sitting and going on TikTok, because that's how you kind of get your brain to relax if you go on TikTok and then you start scrolling too much. But if you're doing something that's also productive, but you're getting a break from like reading, doing something else that can also check something else off your schedule has been really helpful for me and making stress more manageable.
That's a really good tip. I should probably follow that as well, because sometimes, yeah, it's hard to get back to it when you take a break from studying. So I really like that one. Any other tips anybody wants to share about studying or questions or anything? Alrighty. If not, thank you guys so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this one. It will be recorded. I don't know what happened to the last one. We had a guest speaker, and I'm so mad that it's not going to be on YouTube, because we talked about post-traumatic slave syndrome. But hopefully it's another reoccurring thing that we can bring back. And we're trying to get another guest speaker to maybe talk about the medical apartheid, because we haven't really discussed that on here yet. So hopefully we can do that soon. We've reached out to her so we can have an expert on that topic. But yes, thank you guys for coming. We will probably be doing another one of these next month, so you can send me topics that you want to discuss, and we will definitely address those. Hope everyone has a good night, though. Ending the recording now.